Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the session Interviewing for Medical School Preparation and Performance. This session is organized by the Office of Intramural Training and Education at the National Institutes of Health. My name is Elena Hernandez Ramon. I am the director of the pre-medical program. I'm very excited to be here with you today. So let's start giving you some idea of the services we provide in the office and some advice we have for you. So every year we advise hundreds of students trying to apply to medical school. We advise them with advice about the courses they should take, the experiences they should go through, what information they should get from those clinical experiences, why community service is important, leadership, and all these very important aspects of your application. We know this is a complex process. And one of the final steps for you to get into medical school is your interview. Of course, this is the last step of this goal in our office, which is getting into medical school. And we know that once you get there, there is another chapter, other things, other goals. But for this one, this is the last step for us to help you and guide you to this process. So for this final step, I always try to show this very complex graph, but it's one of my favorite because I really want to emphasize that not everything is about numbers. As you can see here, you have acceptance rate according to GPA and MCAT. And of course, as we know, the higher your GPA and the higher your MCAT score, you are going to have more success, you're going to have this acceptance rate increased. However, if you pay attention to this, and let me see if I can increase here. Looks like it's not working. I just wanted to make sure that you see these numbers. So these people, the group here are students who have a higher high MCAT score and high GPA. Sorry, I'm receiving some messages. Is the audio working?
Yes, your audio is.
Okay, great. Thank you. I don't know why I'm receiving this. Okay, great. So the higher your MCAT score, I was telling you, and your GPA, more acceptance rate. However, this group you see here, of course, they have stellar numbers. More than 87% of students with these stats get in. But also more than 10% of these people with the stellar numbers don't get in. So I just want to give you the perspective of the importance of all these factors. The people who don't get in, maybe for different factors, could be, not a very good personal statement, lack of clinical experiences, which is probably the most common question, lack of leadership and other things, but also the interview. You can have everything perfect, and then if you don't have a good interview, that could be an issue. So that's why it's so important to prepare for this interview. So what we're going to discuss today is a one-on-one advice guide for you in the purpose of the interview, what to do before the invitation and after the invitation, what to do before the interview, during the interview, especially before the interview, how to prepare for that, the actual interview and what to do after. And of course, we're going to talk about beta because we know everybody's talking about that. So let's start. So the purpose of the interview. The first important thing that we consider important to remember is that if they are inviting you to an interview, they already like you on paper. They already recognize you as a good applicant for that school, right? So you need to go with that confidence. It's important to remember that during that interview, they want to know you in person. And I know this is going to be virtual this year for most of schools, but still you're going to put a face there, right? So it's very important to actually provide information about these personal qualities. Which personal qualities can be your enthusiasm, your maturity, your integrity, honesty. Of course, very important for future physicians, your social and communication skills, decision-making skills, your leadership, your compassion. So all this is important to see and to show in that interview. You can check the AAMC competencies, core competencies, to see what are the personal competencies or skills or aspects that they are looking for. It's important to remember that they already saw your application, they are happy with that, now they want to meet the person. Also important to remember is that this is a two-way street, right? So you want them to accept you, but you are also interviewing them. You are also trying to check if this is a good fit for you. So that is something that you need to remember. It is important to take this into consideration. You are also selecting schools, okay? And in whatever way possible, if you can have a conversation, that would be great. Not just thinking about this is question number one, this is response number one, question number two, etc. Right? You need to try to establish this conversation with your admissions. Okay? So as probably most of you know, the AAMC published on May 14th that they are strongly encouraging schools, medical school admissions to actually interview virtually. And they are also trying to give this message to all schools and all students. So you all have the same chances and the process is fair and equal. So this is what we know so far. We think that many schools are going to be doing virtual interviews this year. Some schools have already gone to MSAR to update the information about interviews and have actually shared that all the interviews they have are going to be virtual. Some schools haven't done that yet, but that doesn't mean they are not going to do it. I think they still have the previous year's information. So make sure you go to MSAR, the Medical School Admission Requirements website that is part of the AAMC, to check out this information. But we think that this year, probably, if not all, most of schools are going to be doing virtual interviews, and that's going to happen for all students. That's what we think. All right, so yes, this personal connection needs to happen even if we are going to use a virtual interface. So sometimes this is going to be a little bit more challenging because we don't have the whole body language, we don't have the staring, we are not going to have the handshake, but still there are going to be many things you can do to try to convey this message. So before the interview, what is what you need to do? Before the invitation, the interview invitation. You need to prepare. You always need to prepare, right? It is important, though, to remember that most of the questions that are going to ask you are about yourself, your life, your motivations. Why did you decide to take those science courses? Why did you decide to go to that hospital, to take this extracurricular? Why did you decide to provide this service to this community? So these reasons and this information is something you already have. So this is not something you're going to go to the textbook to read about, right? But it's important to have this information structured and organized so you can give a more succinct and more effective message when you have these questions. So a lot of the information, you already have it. You just need to reflect on the reasons and try to put a structure on those responses. One important thing that we have heard from admissions is that they want to see if the candidates have a good heart and good head. So many of them say they already know you have a good head because they already selected you for this interview. They are happy with your stats. They're happy with your whole application. Now they want to see if this is an honest application, if you are genuine, right? They want to see that person. So it is important to transmit that. And obviously, prepare for this. Take your time to reflect and structure the questions you can structure. All right, so yes, you are very happy when you receive this interview invitation, of course, and we are also very happy to hear that from our students. That's a great achievement. They already selected you for this invitation, for this interview. And then what are the things you need to do? Once you receive the interview invitation, make sure that you fulfill some courtesies and logical steps, like responding quickly and politely. When they ask you about different dates, make sure that you really stick to those dates. In very exceptional cases, people need to ask for a different schedule, but we strongly recommend you to make your best effort to choose one of the dates they are offering you. Sometimes they're going to ask you to meet with the students. This year, everything is going to be different. We don't know what format they are going to use, but we think that they will find a way that you get more information and a better feeling of the environment in that school. So they may ask you to or invite you to meet with some students or have any virtual kind of meeting. So make sure you take advantage of all the interactions they offer. That is going to give you more information to choose or not choose this school, right? Great. Now, what are the things you will do before the interview? Of course, you need to prepare, right? So this visit is in that email, you're going to have instructions for this visit. And usually those are long emails with a lot of information. So the first very simple but very important advice here is please read the instructions. We've heard a lot of admissions sharing with us. I would say the number first complaint is that you are asking questions about things that they already shared in that email, and you just didn't have the time to read everything carefully. So this may annoy them, and you need to show that you are doing your homework. So make sure that you carefully read that email, read all the instructions, and you follow the instructions they are giving to you. And at the same time, you need to gather all the information about the interview that you need. What is the information you need? So first, you need to know about the format. So this year for virtual interviews, we have two kinds of virtual formats. One is the live virtual interview, and the other one is the asynchronous virtual interview. So for the first one, you are going to have an interviewer in real time. I would say this is much more fun because you can interact with this person. Usually they can ask you questions like in a one-on-one format. Sometimes those are MMIs, but there are always people there, and this is happening in real time. The other kind of virtual interview is the asynchronous one, and for that is usually a recording. There is not an interviewer there, and your responses again are going to be recorded by a device. So those are the two kinds, and you really want to know what is the format they are going to use. Some schools may use both, as you may have heard already. Some schools may use the AMC beta to complement the actual interview that is going to happen in real time. And at this moment, the schools are still deciding how they are going to use that. The other kinds of interviews that you want to ask about is if those are going to be one-on-one. In some special cases, you have group interviews. There are more than one student. In some interviews, you are the only student, but you have different people in the same room, right? In this case, it's going to be a virtual room. And sometimes you're going to have multiple mini interviews. So we're going to talk about more about the MMIs and multiple mini interviews later. But you want to make sure that you know the format of that interview. So this is the point when you are gathering all this information. You also want to know what is the platform they are using. And this is very important because you need to get familiar with it. Number of interviewers, you need to have an idea how long. They usually share this information in the first email, how long this interview is, what type of questions they are going to ask. Sometimes, like in the beta kind of interview type, they actually tell you the kind of questions they're going to ask you, if they're going to be behavioral, if they're going to be more direct questions, etc. So it's important to have this information and also to start thinking about what are the competencies. If they don't tell you, you can start thinking about the competencies or skills they are assessing through that interview. So all this is important to plan and to help you plan your preparation. Now, this is going to be a virtual interview, right? Still, your attire and your personal care is going to be very, very important. It is important that you dedicate the time to present yourself professionally. So as we advise for the in-person interview, you need to show a neat, clean, and professional looking. This is professional, this is business professional attire. You need to remember that. This is not casual, okay? A jacket or a suit is expected because this is in general a conservative profession. I always have a lot of questions about, well, I don't want to show that formal. I want to be a little bit more flexible. I want to show more colors. And I always say, remember that in general, this is a conservative profession. You are taking a risk if you go beyond that conservative format, and the consequences of taking these risks are higher than if you go conservative, right? So I try to always wear black and white when I give this presentation. So I give you like an example, and a blazer or a jacket and plain colors is something that we advise. You don't want to have something that distracts your interviewer. So we recommend modest, not flashy, right? For ties, for blouses, something that is plain. Some people say that is boring. Sometimes, to be completely honest with you, yes, it looks like boring, but we want to have the boring here, so the things you say and the expressions you have are actually the things they are paying attention to. You don't want them to be distracted with that tie, right? Or with that very shiny jacket or blazer. So we always recommend to avoid distractors as possible. Wear whatever you feel more comfortable with, your suit, skirt, or pantsuit, whatever you feel professional and comfortable. Something very important, dress professionally top and bottom. At this moment, we know that most probably they are going to just see you from here to here, right? But there are two main reasons why we advise you to do this. The first one is about how you feel. You need to try to feel this as real time, as normal as possible. And if you go to an interview, you go with those professional pants, you go with those professional shoes too, right? And they are clean. And your whole you feels professional. And that's something you show, you transmit, right? So make sure that that is something you pay attention to. So you transmit that professional look. The second thing is we don't know how they are gonna ask you about the things you are. So hopefully, and we hope this is not happening to you. They're not gonna ask you anything about this. But I just had this comment from someone who was interviewing. This was a job interview. This was not medical school interview. But for me, it was very, very interesting to hear that the interviewer actually asked the postdoc to stand up and show if the person was actually wearing professional clothing. So I was very surprised. I just hope that you are covered, that you are, wearing professional clothes, and hopefully you are not going to have this case. I think it was very weird, but you just need to be prepared. So try to dress professionally, top and bottom. And I would say, probably first of all, dress top and bottom, because we know things that have been happening recently. You need to have this attire. Just make sure that you have this covered. Okay, great. So also pay attention to hair and nails. That's what we were hearing before from admissions, that some people don't pay attention to the hair or to the nails. The nails are important. I don't know, if you're a person like me, and I always recommend people to use their hands to express their ideas, your nails may be visible, right? So I would say, yes, pay attention to that too. And if your hair require more time to put it together, take your time. For people who use makeup, I have this question also very frequently. Try to tone it down. You don't want to show something very exaggerated, and the same for jewelry. You don't want to have something that is so bulky that is actually distracting your interviewer. So this is very, very important, because we know that first impressions count a lot. So take your time to prepare for this interview, for your attire, and for your personal care. All right. Now this year, everything different, right? Because previous years, schools really don't like virtual interviews. And even people abroad, they were asking them to come here. Now most of them are gonna use the virtual interviews. So we need to talk about technology and location. For technology, there are a few things you need to prepare. You know that you can use your computer or your phone for almost every platform, but we strongly recommend you to use your computer. You have a better view, you have, it's already set up to avoid holding it or putting some temporary ways to hold it. I would say the quality of your video and your audio probably is better. So try to use a computer if possible. Familiarize with the platform, that's very important. It makes a huge difference if you practice a little bit before and you show that you already mastered that platform. We have had experience with that with some people we interview, and that really makes you feel that the person is prepared and took the time to really familiarize with the platform. The internet speed is important, so you can test it. You need to make sure you have a good internet speed. And I'm going to talk about other options if you don't have a good internet speed or the location, and that could be ideal for this. Make sure to test your microphone and headphones in advance. I was having actually some issues before starting this. Make sure that you try different options and go with whatever feels good. Sometimes people just are not comfortable with headphones. I actually like these ones. I'm going to show them to you because I was going to use them today. If you are comfortable with this, that is fine. You may have a better audio, and if you have a good microphone, that may work better. For some people, this may be uncomfortable. So whatever it is, in general, microphones and headphones are better than just the computer audio, but you need to try what is better for you. You need to practice eye contact, and this is a weird part because you don't have anybody in front of you, right? You just have the webcam. Sometimes people are gonna share their screen and their camera, sorry, and that would be great because at least you can see people there. However, it is important to remember that you can look at the cameras and then for them you are looking down, right? So that doesn't look like eye contact. So even if it's weird, you need to get used to look at the webcam. You need to make sure that you practice that so they have that feeling that you are looking at them. Because if you are looking up, if you are looking to a corner, if you have, for whatever setting, you have those webcam pictures at the bottom of your screen, then it doesn't look like you are making eye contact. And this is very important. So try to practice that. The position of the webcam should be at your eye level. I'm sure you have seen webinars where people are actually looking down at the phone sometimes or looking up. It is not just the same feeling. So try to position the webcam at eye level and try to use plain background. And let me take a minute here. Backgrounds are important because they can again distract your interviewers. So if you have something that is moving, if you have this sea with these waves moving, coming back and forth, that is not something you want, right? So try to use something plain or professional, but try to avoid distractions. Remember, that is going to be our goal here. There are ways to change the background to these fancy backgrounds. They are not moving, they're still nice. The silhouette that appears with that kind of background is many times blurry. And there is another problem there. If you don't move, that can be stable, but if you start moving, you can have issues maintaining that background stable. And sometimes your actual background starts showing up. So I just remember one meeting we had with someone. The background behind was not very professional. And I remember the person talking and noticing the background and feeling that he needed to move somewhere. So the camera was actually taking the good angle for the background. Is so distracting. So my recommendation would be use just a regular background. Just make sure that it's plain or it's professional, okay? Turn off email and other message notifications. They are very distracting. Shut down all the programs you have that can be sending you notifications, or maybe even using memory or some capacity from your computer, so the video could be affected. And then lastly, but very importantly, have a backup plan. Technology fail. We know that technology fails. So make sure that you have even your phone as a backup. Is not ideal, but you at least have something that you can use in case technology is not working. All right. So this is all about technology. Then we'll talk about location. So for location, we know that sometimes it's not possible to find a quiet place. That is the ideal situation, right? Quiet, private place when you can have a desk, when you can have your computer. If that can be a room in your house, that would be fantastic. You should let people know that you're going to have an interview and ask them to please don't produce any noise, and you have this quiet place. Sometimes we know that that is not possible, so you can look for libraries, public libraries, you can look for community centers. Some institutions are offering some offices, so you can go there. We know that some schools are actually advising to have that in your car. So I would say that would be the last resource. You want a place that is ventilated, that have good light. But I understand also that the interruptions is probably the last thing you want. So consider if that could be an option for you. I would say private is an important thing, so you have as less interruptions as possible. In very special circumstances, you cannot have all those characteristics, right? Sometimes you cannot have a private room, or it is just impossible to have this uncontrolled noise. So you need to let know your interviewers about that situation, right? Some people just had a baby or whatever situation is, right? You need to let them know at the beginning so you don't have to interrupt your interview explaining what is going on. But hopefully you can find this quiet and private place. Okay. What do you want to do? How do you want to be sitting or standing up? It's up to you. Sometimes the interviews are long. You may be more comfortable if you sit down, but some people are more comfortable standing up. So now you have that option because you are in charge of where to put your camera and how to do it. If you are sitting, make sure it's a comfortable chair. Make sure you have a nearby outlet because you never know if your computer or your phone is going to die, the battery. And then finally, but very importantly, pay attention to the light. We have seen in many, many cases. Make sure that the source of that light is the right one. So I have a picture here of how your main light should come from, what the professional people call it the key light, comes from the front, if possible from a side. You can still have some backlight, but that should be minimal. And also what they call the field light to avoid shadows. But the most important message today is don't have your light, your main source of light at the back behind you, because then your face is not gonna show. It's gonna be like the anonymous interview, right? So make sure that you actually pay attention to the light. Okay. Right. So before going to practice, I would like to stop and ask if everything is going fine, if there are some urgent questions I need to answer now. Let me go to the chat box to see if I have some questions here. Okay, I have a question about the how do interviews for MD, PhD, and MD differ and how they are similar. So for some MD, PhD programs, you are going to still interview separately for the MD part. Sometimes you have the people interviewing you together. So it varies from school to school, but for sure you're going to have much more questions about your research. They're going to ask you why you want this combined program, why that school, and then you're going to expand on why that particular school for the MD PhD program. So It varies from school to school. Yes, you can have the MD separate or you can have them together. Okay. Let me see what else. Normally we would be expected to take off of work for interview. Yes, especially when people are, so people at the NIH, we are at the NIH, when these agreements go from the beginning, the PIs already know that you are in this process, and they are usually very supportive to take this day off or morning off or afternoon off, right? So that's something you may want to talk to your PI or to your manager or with your boss. I have another question here. How should we navigate continuing to go to work and probably interviewing at the same time? So again, I think it's important to ask what you need, right? So if you are doing research or you are working in this place, or if you are even at school, you need to really communicate well with your supervisors or your manager and explain that you are going through this process and you need to take this time. What we have seen at the NIH is that it really works where you show your flexibility and you say, for example, my interview is at 10 a.m. So I may need to take from 9 to 11 or 1 or whatever time, or even if it's several days, right? This day and tomorrow too. However, I know I have a lot of work to do, so I am going to be making up this time later today or over the weekend or this Friday, right? So you really show that you are willing to make up the time and you are not just asking for free time. So asking for flexibility may work better than asking for time off. And still, again, you may have some time off, like your vacation time or whatever that you want to use, but hopefully you don't do that, because this is part of your process and you can always make up the time. All right. I live in the city, so it's very loud in my apartment sometimes. So I know that you have sometimes this situation. What we are advising people to do is, if you are in group A or group B, because we learned very recently that group B is going to be incorporating soon at the NIH, and this person works at the NIH, yes. So what we recommend is that you find this place in your labs, talk to your PI, see if it's possible to have a conference room for you for that day. I think that's going to work much better than going to the public library. Now, still, you have the NIH, sorry, this is part of the second question. Yes, we have the NIH the NIH library, and I am not sure about the rooms, if you can rent one there, but for sure, I would say just call them and ask, right? I think they would be open to support people in this situation. But I have the impression that if you are already at the NIH, you may have that option through your institute. Okay. Great. Let me see. If the technology fails in some way during the interview for a reason that isn't our fault, what would you suggest we do? And is there any possibility of salvaging the situation? Of course, I have one slide for that, but let me just respond now. If everything fails for the technology, make sure that you calm down, you breathe, and you ask for other options. You can make a phone call at that moment if they already saw you. You can ask for more options. You can ask about rescheduling, because that was something that, even that you prepared in all the ways we already said, still things can fail. So please go ahead in a calm way and say, well, this is failing. How can we fix this? Can I call again? Can you call me again? Can we set up another meeting? Usually when the technology fails, let's say if it's the audio, if there is something that you can actually fix at the moment, if you are calm, you are going to be more capable to fix it. So don't freak out, breathe, and make sure that you have all your senses and your capacity in the best way to fix the problem. Okay. Okay. If there is something that is not in your hands, you can send after an email apologizing. If that was something really that in your hands, right? Don't feel like if the technology fails, it's always your fault, because it's not like that. All right, okay, so I have another question about background. For the background, should we show the actual background of a room if it is neat, or would it be better to add a virtual background? Is there a wide zoom background? Okay, so I think I talked about that. I prefer that you direct your webcam towards a wall or a window, because you never control what is in the other side, right? So this is my temporary office, which is my daughter's bedroom, and sometimes my son comes in, right? And if I have headphones and my microphone is closed here, the noise is not going to be a big issue, and they don't have to see everything behind, right? So for me, wall or window is much better. I don't like the virtual backgrounds because they fail, right? So you can also try that. Try your virtual neutral background on your wall, not your, wardrobe with all messy clothes or whatever, if you have that, right? And even just for the people that could be passing around, just the wall is safe, the window is safe. Okay. Okay, I think we are covering these questions. Now we can go ahead with the next session. Okay, I think we're doing good with time. Okay, let's go to practice. And I'll say now that I am drinking water, whenever you need to drink water during interview, just this is normal, right? You may need water and this is totally fine. Maybe a more professional glass or whatever. Okay, so body language is super important. We have some limitation with this format now, but we can still use a lot of things. Just to remind you, body language covers more than 55% of the message. Your tone of voice covers almost 40%. So between these two, more than 90% of your message is conveyed. So you can be saying, in other words, you can be saying things that are not that important, but if your voice and your body is telling that, that's going to look important, right? I am not saying don't pay attention to the words, of course, but we generally just pay attention to the words and don't look at these other aspects. So make sure that you work both in your body language and your voice additionally to the words that you are preparing for this interview. Okay, so for some reason I cannot see myself, but doesn't matter. Sometimes it's even better. Sitting or standing is something that you are going to decide. Whatever you choose to do, you need to hold yourself tall. What is your impression if you see me like this than if you see me like this, right? And I always try to imitate and act for my students. Eye contact is important. So I can be saying I could be saying something very important to you, but I am looking at my other screen. I don't convey the same message, right? Handshake. So that's so important. We always say we need a firm handshake, right? So now we have other tools, and you need to make sure you use them. Your handshake for the virtual version could be several things depending of what you like the most. You can just use like a wave, hi, firm, could be still firm, right? Could be nodding, good morning. Thank you for inviting me today for the interview. Something that shows your enthusiasm, and a good handshake could be your head, could be your hand, okay? There are other ways to do it, via chat, via these other ways that you can show in the emotion things, depending on the platform. You can try to use them both, but I would say the one that you show is much more important, okay? Your sitting position is very important, as it is for the actual in-person interview. So what is your impression if I am like this, right? Like so informal that I am laying down? Or what is your impression if I actually sit at the edge of my chair and I am totally paying attention to what is happening there, right? Sitting showing your attention is important, and that message is conveyed much better if you actually sit at the edge of your chair and you incline your body a little bit forward. Okay. Gestures and movements showing enthusiasm, and this is number one. You really need to be expressive here as much as possible because we don't have the rest of your body to show that, right? So when you said, I am very excited to be here today, or your program has this special activity or this special program, I'm very interested, right? Is your eyes, your mouth, your eyebrows, your hands, everything expressing the message. Something I've heard for admissions is how unhappy they are when you have something important to say and you are like totally plain. Like, I'm very excited, right? Doesn't matter what I am saying. If I don't show that excitement, that doesn't count. So make sure your whole body is involved in this expression, okay? I know also that some cultures express more than others. Try to express as much as possible. Make an effort to do this, okay? I was saying interacting with the body. Some people move the whole body, and please still do it. Your hands. I have this question very often. How much should I use my hands? I feel I'm going to use them too much. I think I have rarely seen someone using the hands too much. You try to express your ideas, use your hands. That's a good thing. And be aware of nervous habits. We see that when we do the mock interviews with our students, that you don't even realize what you are doing. So some people, and I have a pencil here on purpose, try to remove everything from your table, because if you have a pencil like I have here, some people tend to start fidgeting, playing with it, some people even chewing it. You don't pay attention, you are just focusing on the things you are saying. So be aware of your regular nervous habits and try to remove whatever possible. If it's the hair, you cannot remove it, and some people are all the time like playing with the hair, right? And that distracts the interviewer. So try to have much more as neutral as possible position and try not to fidget. When you prepare the questions, it's easier to go to the structure and pay attention to your body, right? So try to have this preparation so you are aware of all these other important aspects. Your voice is super important, super important. This includes voice tone and volume. If this is something important, you really want to say that firm and loud, right? You are too quiet, you are too shy, doesn't look like you have the confidence. So work on that voice. The voice tones are important because it is so different to say something. For example, when you're excited with something, it's just natural that you have these different voice tones. I have had some students that have this very, very plain voice tone that I asked them to draw a line. And I said, okay, listen to yourself and draw this line and tell me when you are up and down. And I usually with those students see kind of a plain line, right? So try to actually play with your voice and make sure that you use different tones to actually show that emphasis and that excitement. And I have another, this is not a repetition, I actually mean voice tones and voice tone, because we have seen, especially new generations, that many people when they speak, let's say I ask you about if you are interested in this part of this program in my school, and you say, I'm actually very interested, and that is actually a response, even if it sounds like a question. So you are very interested, you're very excited, or you're very excited. We have noticed that this is more like a generational thing. Pay attention to how you respond to questions and make sure that for these important questions, especially, you have an affirmative tone, not a question-like tone. Okay? So I really want to share with you this article, and actually it's a video about how your body language shapes who you are. Take your time. We're not going to play it now, but the link is in the PDF. So I have in the handout section a PDF with all the slides, and all the links are included there. Here you can see the importance of your body language and how your body language actually affects your physiology and makes you show more confidence. So it's not just a matter of what others see about you, it's also what is happening inside you. For example, if you, what is the position? Is the power position. This is the example here. So if you practice your power position a few seconds before your interview, a lot of things are happening in your body. A lot of hormones are secreted. So your confidence is going to show better than if you don't do it. Isn't that interesting? So whatever it is, take a look and see if this convinces you of how important is your body language here for them and for you too. All right. We need to practice, right? We need to practice questions, of course. And this is the part of the words that we already know is 7%, but yes, we still need to practice that. So you need to be aware that there are different kinds of questions. There are general questions, which ask you to describe yourself in general in a broad way, like tell me why you're interested in this school, tell me why you want to go to medical school, why you want to be a physician, etc. Right? So these are general questions. You can have behavioral questions, and these describe experiences, usually previous experiences, that demonstrate knowledge and skills to the extent of your experiences. And that is much more about what were the things you were doing, why you were doing them in a particular situation. Sorry, this is behavioral, your particular behavior under those circumstances. And this is usually something that happened in the past. So they may ask you, what happened? Describe me one challenging experience, right? And then you need to describe what happened. We usually recommend the STAR technique, and I have a slide for that. So you describe the situation, the tasks, the actions, and the results. You need to cover all those sections because they want to see how you resolve that problem, right? So start thinking about these situations, these experiences, when you can actually show a lot of core competencies, important competencies for this profession. Finally, you can have situational questions. There are usually hypothetical situations where they ask you, what if in this situation, if you had this kind of behavior or this kind of situation, what would you do? What should you do, right? So these are the situational questions, and just be prepared for these three kinds. We always recommend that you review what you wrote. They usually have questions about the things you write, and sometimes they refer to one experience, and some of you just don't remember to read that again, remember the details of that experience, and that can caught you by surprise. So make sure that you really review your materials, your application, your essays. There are very common questions. For example, tell me about yourself, tell me about a weakness, tell me about this school. So I really want to give you like a good picture of how you can answer these questions more efficiently. So for the tell me about yourself question, make sure that there is something personal that you share with them. What is the degree of the personal? Of course, this is going to depend on your story and how comfortable you are. Some people really like to mention something about their family, the place where they grew up, the hobbies they developed when they were very young. And again, you need to be comfortable with that, right? I think sharing a little, at least a little bit of that, can help to make this personal connection. So this is your story. Sometimes you have something to remember. Don't get so worried about that. Some people just start thinking about some weird things. So don't. If you have something to remember, for them to remember, that's fine. Please make sure that you include your interest in medicine here. We have every year many students that are reserving your interest in medicine for the question why medicine, and some of you don't have that question asked. So make sure that this interest in medicine is part of your story, is part of yourself. Tell me about yourself, right? So this story may need to include your interest in medicine. You don't need to go to details like I shadowed this doctor, I observed this, but somehow let them know when you develop this first initial interest in medicine, how you confirm this interest, volunteering or shadowing in general. You don't need to be so specific, right? But make sure that this confirmation and this exploration is part of this telling about yourself. Your hobbies, if you didn't have the chance to share them at the beginning, you can share them at the end too, like some additional thing to share. And make sure that this doesn't look like a CV, right? Your CV is like one bullet point, second, third. Make sure that you explain why you did this and you did that when you move from one stage to another, right? So let's say you were in college and you started doing research. So tell them why you were interested in doing research, what kind of research you were interested in, and then that's why you applied to that lab, right? So that little bit of explanation beforehand helps you to transition and to make the story more coherent. If they ask you about a weakness, make sure that you don't go around with the weakness. You name it, you say why it is important to share it today, why you are talking about that weakness. Give an example. Very importantly, what you have done or you are doing to work on that. What is the strategy to improve or solve? I am not saying just mention that you are working on that. Show them in a concrete way what is the strategy. Because if you said, I had some communication skills to develop, but I'm working on that, and you don't mention how, then it doesn't look like you are doing a great job to solve that weakness. Make sure that when you talk about that strategy, you share things that are happening by your own initiative and not because it's something you need to do anyway. I'm going to give you an example. If we talk about communication skills, make sure that you mention things and you actually do things like, I volunteered to give these presentations. I took this option to present a poster in this place, right? So that was not something that you had to do, that it was compulsory to do, but you actually realized that it was a good opportunity for you to develop those skills. So show your initiative. And then at the end of this description, make sure that you show your progress. You are working on that strategy is working, and you have good progress. Usually we say, try to choose something that you are still working on that even a little bit, because if they ask you about a present weakness, if you have that solved, then that is not a present weakness and you are not answering the question, right? But if you share something that you have a good progress on that, but still there's some things that you need to fine tune, you can express that, and that still works as a present weakness with a good progress given the strategies you are using. So those are the sections you need to cover in a weakness or in a challenging situation. There is another question that we usually have about turning your weaknesses into strengths. So although we always try to advise you to have this positive perspective when you respond to this question, we have heard many times from admissions saying that a lot of people are not able to recognize mistakes or to recognize weaknesses. They take something very trivial and they said, well, this is nail, and actually this helped me to this, that, and that. And many of these people give the impression that they were just not able to recognize a weakness. They are trying to say something, but it's not like a real weakness. Saying that you are the perfectionist apparently has been overused for years, so we don't recommend you to use this, right? I am a perfectionist. This is a big weakness for me, right? But however, this has allowed me to do this, and that. So make sure that you share a real weakness, something you have worked on and you have good progress. Okay, why this school is a very common question. Make sure that you do your homework. You really need to do your research and learn specifics about the school. You need to know about the mission, the curriculum, what programs they offer. especially if they have very particular programs, very special programs. You need to know the names. You need to know what the program is about. That is the way for you to show how important, how unique that school is. So this first aspect is one of the most important ones for this question. You need to be very specific about the community they serve, the hospital affiliations they have, everything that is specific. So you may use most of your time talking about the specifics, right? You can also show that you are a good fit and how your previous experiences actually match with the mission of this school. And you make sure that you go beyond the website. You need to ask people, right? You need to ask students, how do you feel? Is this, why did you choose this school? And try to ask questions that are open instead of a yes or no question, like, are you happy in this school? Because most of the students are going to say yes, but you need to really, really investigate well why. And this is so important because sometimes you can hear people saying, I am super happy here because this school is super competitive. It's always one against each other. This is just great. And for you, that could be actually not the best environment. Other people can say, well, we collaborate a lot. This is just a group effort, whatever, and you really want to do these things more by yourself. Everyone is different. You need to see what is the best fit for you. Okay, so ask these open questions to students. And you can mention at the end other important things that are more personal, but not make this like the most important reason why you are applying there. Some people say, I want to apply to this school because my family lives there, or because I really like the city, right? So if there are other schools there with the same kind of same setting, it doesn't matter if it's that school or the other school, right? You really need to tell them that they are very good, and they should be, because you are choosing them. You chose them when you were submitting your primary application. So hopefully you did your homework before, but now you need to give it that even in more depth, because you need to be very specific with this question. Sometimes I think it is still important to say if you have family around, or your support system is around, that is important. Just don't make that like the first reason, right? I always say, if that's extreme weather, you can even say, and I really thrive in this snowest place in the country, right? But that is really a brief mention at the end, because that is not going to be the reason. If you are applying to DO schools, make sure that you highlight the unique aspects of this kind of medicine, right? If this is the manipulative aspect of the osteopathic medicine, or the holistic view, or how putting together this knowledge about the person, the patient's emotions and the symptoms, whatever you have witnessed when you shadow these DO people, make sure that you highlight what makes them unique. Okay, great. So other common question could be, tell me about a challenging situation. And for that, we recommend you to use the CAR or STAR technique. It's basically the same. This is a structured way to answer questions, and this is very helpful when you are trying to respond a question that can be a little bit complicated. Remember to give the context first, context or situation, right? The task, that is usually what the problem is, that could be included in the context if you use the CAR acronym. And then, what did you do? The action, and finally, what is the outcome? What are the results? So make sure that you actually use this experience where you are showing good competencies for medical school. Hopefully this was resolved by your own initiative. Hopefully the results are positive, successful, and you have a nice story to share. You may have questions about the situation we are living these days. So be prepared for COVID-19 related questions, how this situation affected you. Many of you had this in your secondary application, but still they may ask you how this situation affected you academically, personally, and professionally, right? Some of you had to make changes, to move to other places, to move to a different format for your courses. Some of you personally were affected, moving to a different place, having to work or losing that job. Whatever it is, it's important to start preparing for that because you may have that question asked. Make sure that when you talk about this, don't use the topic to make excuses or blame, right? I had this question very often about why, how can I explain that I don't have clinical volunteering? And I've heard from admissions several times that they expect that you work on that beforehand. They can understand that the experience was interrupted. They can understand that you are not going to have the number of hours that you were expecting, but hopefully you started working on that before February or March, right? So this is not the place to blame and say, oh, that's why I don't have so many hours of clinical volunteering, right? But very importantly, take advantage of this situation. And we know that this has affected everyone in a very severe way. Just to share how your perspective about medicine changed after this situation. What did you learn about medicine or healthcare, the healthcare system with this situation, right? So still, it's an opportunity for you to show things you learn, new things you learn, and your perspective too. When you talk about your research, okay, let me see if I have questions. Okay, this is 3 or 4. I think I need to hurry up. Yeah. I'm going to review questions at the end. When you talk about your research, make sure that you include the big picture of your research, your hypothesis, what are the scientific questions you are trying to answer. Use the methods as your means to answer those questions. Some people say, I was able to master this technique. You are not a technician, right? You are using these techniques to answer a scientific question. So put it like that. Discuss your results, what they mean, and very importantly, what is the application in the medical field when you talk about research. I have a list of questions here that we are not going to discuss, but for sure may be important for you to just reflect and think about it. So I have 2 slides with questions, and at the end of the second slide, I have this link for the 100 questions from the University of Colorado. Of course, you don't need to prepare for all those, but just in your mind, going through them may be useful. You may be asked about current issues, so think about that, COVID-related or not, current health-related topics, new advances in medicine or in research. So make sure you're up to date in this kind of information. We have a couple of recommendations for ethical issues. You have the books here. There are tons of books out there. We have seen that these are very good ones, but they are not the only ones. Medical Ethics and Doing Right. You have the authors here, and you will have the slides with the information or the handout. You need to ask them questions. That's something you always need to do, right? You need to have questions for them. So those can be personal, could be about the programs. Make sure that this year you have even more directed questions like, how do they do virtual orientation? How the curriculum is changing with this situation, etc. Just before the interview, and everybody's nervous in the interviews. That's normal. You are a human being, right? So make sure that you use some techniques. There are mindfulness, meditation techniques. You need to reframe and transform your thoughts. A lot of people start thinking, oh, this is going to be awful. I'm going to suffer. This is just so stressful. Try to see this as an opportunity for them to know you and for you to know them better, the school, the staff, etc. There are calming breath exercises when you can just Google 478 alternate nostril breathing. I usually have the exercise when we do this in person, but we are not going to do that today. And also use your power posing. That could help you to release some hormones and show more confidence in that interview. We have some books and online resources for you for the calming, mindfulness, and meditation here. For the interview itself, please arrive on time, arrive early, right? Arrive, yes, we know that this is going to be most probably virtual, but you need to be there on time, arrive early. Try to be yourself, right? Some people say prepare for the show. It depends how it works for you. You can see that as a show, but still be yourself and show the genuine you, right? See your interviews as your friends. So this can be controversial. I would say try to convey the message and give your story as if you have a group of good friends that you really want to know you better, right? It's not the kind of friend that you're going to totally relax, but it's going to be the friend that just listen. I have so much things to share with you. Let me share this with enthusiasm. This kind of friends, right? Try to have a conversation instead of ask question answer. Show your enthusiasm and confidence. Smiling is super important. If it was important before, I think now with the virtual format, it's even more important. So I know it's weird, but try to practice your smile because that is going to show your confidence. You're smiling. And remember, everything is part of the interview. So if you're going to meet with those students at this point, everything is part of the interview. You should always be professional. Probably with the students a little bit more relaxed, but always professional. Okay? For the interview day, please turn off your cell phone. Be prepared for the unexpected. Sometimes the technology fails, right? And we already talked about that. So keep calm, breathe, and carry on, right? And if you have this question that is really difficult, you have no idea what this is about, just say, I don't know. It's always much better that you say that you don't know instead of try to make this up. And actually, I heard a couple of cases last year and some cases before that some admissions make up a situation and actually news about a medical new device. And they ask the student, what do you think about this new device? And some students have said, oh, that's wonderful. I heard about that. And I think this is fantastic, right? And some students have said, sounds exciting, but I haven't heard about that. And actually, it was just a fake case, right? So be very careful about these things and try to be always honest. And if you don't know the answer, be frank and say, actually, I don't know the answer for that, but I will look for that. It's going to be interesting to know more about that, whatever, right? If you have an incident on your record, make sure that you are prepared to answer that question. You need to be honest. You need to make sure that you show that you have learned from that experience, that you did some work to learn why that was not good, if it was an institutional action or anything like that, and that you are a different person now. Try not to blame others, take responsibility of your actions, and show them how much you have learned after that. Okay, at the interview day, please have fun. This is an opportunity for you. You need to enjoy that. And all the beginnings are hard. Probably the beginning may be a little bit more nervous, but try to enjoy the day. Okay? After the interview, make sure that you send take you notes if the school allows that. Follow instructions. Sometimes you have questions about updates. Take advantage for that, asking that question at that time. All right, very quickly, MMIs, multiple mini interviews. We've heard from some schools that they're still doing that in a virtual format. I don't know how they're going to do that, but they will figure that out. So prepare for that because they may happen. You may have scenarios. Most of the times you have a lot of some scenarios and you need to read, reconsider. You have some minutes to do that, and then you're going to have a person in front of you and you need to answer a question or some questions. Role play, I think, is going to be more difficult with this format that they may happen. You may have a station with traditional question and answer interview. And so in the past, they have this format, the simple task, when you're with a group of people, you need to do something or yourself. It's going to be harder this time, I think, but that is going to be up to schools, right? Just make sure that when you have these scenarios, you identify what are the possible scoring categories they are trying to evaluate here, if it's ethics, if it's professionalism, communication, teamwork, etc. When you have this kind of situation or scenarios, we recommend you to take this time. You usually have 6 to 8 minutes to answer the questions in the scenarios, and that's a long time. So take advantage of this time to first recapitulate. for you and for the person you are talking to about the situation. Mention the different perspectives or the different people involved in the situation, and then address the question you have. At the end, you can summarize in a very general way what is going to be what is your answer, right? So that will allow you to use your time better. We recommend this book for MMIs, multiple mini interviews, and you have the authors here, and you will have that in your slides. So remember to make a positive first impression. That's very important. Smiling, remember, that's important. Show the person, just show your confidence, show that you have done your homework, you understand the profession, you have the exposure, you have explored enough. Demonstrate your knowledge about their program. They are unique. You need to do your homework beforehand, right? Show that you're a good fit, that you are excited about this opportunity. You want to enroll here, right? You have prepared. And if they ask you, if you find room to share something you haven't covered before, take advantage of that. Finally, the AMC video interview tool for admissions beta. We don't know a lot about that, but I'm going to share what we know, and this is actually in the AMC website. You can check it that there. But just as a summary, this is a tool designed to assess competencies important for success in medical school. Many of the questions may be very similar to a one-on-one interview, but this is going to be recorded, right? So the competencies that they want to cover: social skills, cultural competencies, teamwork, reliability, dependability, and resilience and adaptability. Some questions may differ, and questions are designed to be unrelated to the medical field. So it's going to be fair for everyone. It's not going to depend on how much clinical experience you have. Okay. So you need to do it one time, no interviewer there, right? You need to record yourself. So they ask you a question, you have 1 minute. I have that slide in the next one, but anyway, so you have 1 minute to think, and then you record yourself. Oh, it's actually here, 1 minute, and then to read and reflect, and then you record yourself, and you can pause and then continue later. Doesn't matter how long you take between questions. They are supposed to complement the regular interview, not to replace it. So that is something you need to know. And one big worry was the use of artificial intelligence to evaluate this, and they have confirmed they are not using artificial intelligence to evaluate these interviews. So as we discussed in the previous questions, you may have behavioral, you may have more general questions, you can have situational, and the kind of questions are exactly the same. All right, I think I'm done. I went a little bit beyond the time, but I am happy to answer questions now. Okay, I think I have some questions here. Let me go back and see. I think the last question is here. Can we, I don't know if this is the first question, but let me read this one. Can we pick up talking to staff we know at the college or we spoke to about the program? Yes, I think especially for MD, PhD people, you need to show them that you have done your homework. You actually chose those programs because they do the kind of research you want, right? For MD, regular MD, in general, it's not the most common case that you are interacting with directly with the staff, but I would say that can give a great advantage, great opportunity for you if, let's say, you stayed this summer in that school to do research, and then people know that you are applying, and then you can mention, right? I did my research here. I have interacted with these people, and that kind of referring to these people is stronger than just an email or a less formal interaction. You may have had interacted with people during a conference, and you can also do that. As long as it shows your interest, I think it's fine, right? You are not trying to say, I have someone here who knows me, but you are trying to say, I know the school through different venues. I have interacted in this setting and in this other different setting, and I have learned all this about your school, and I think that's a good thing for them to know. Okay. Is it best to take like 5-10 seconds after a question to gather your thoughts and think about your answer? Absolutely. Absolutely. Much better doing that than start rambling and saying things that you haven't considered. You can even say, let me take a few seconds. I am putting my thoughts in order, right? And that's totally fine. Oh, I don't have this question here, but I had this question recently. Can I have post-its around my screen with some prompts of things I need to remember? So that was an interesting question because I think it is important to show that you know what you are saying. You may have stickers around your screen that can be falling down, and you don't want to give the impression that you are reading here. So if they are completely secure and you have like the 3 prompts you need for the tell me about yourself or something like that, it may help, right? But yes, you need to make sure you prepare in advance for at least for these most common questions. I forgot to tell you something. For the eye contact, I actually have here on my computer a picture of my sister, and I am looking at her all the time because for me it's just so weird to look at the camera. So if that helps you, just put an image there and you feel that you are talking to someone. In your case may be different because you are going to have actually the people there. In my case, I have 200 people. I don't see anybody, right? So that's a little bit weird. But just try to find the tools that can help you make this as natural as possible. Okay? Great question. Okay, let me see this other one. How distinct should our interview answers be from our says? Oh, that's a very good question. It seems like the topic are nearly identical, at least in regards to personal statement. That's totally correct. And that's a very good question. So if your personal statement was about why medicine, why you want to be a physician, if they ask you in person, why you want to be a physician, do you feel you need to change your answer? No, right? The answer is the same. So you are not going to memorize what you wrote in that personal statement, but you're going to stick to the story because that was hopefully a genuine story, right? And the reasons are going to be the same and the experiences are going to be the same. So don't worry about giving the same information. They actually expect that this is congruent, that this coincides with the information you shared in your primary application. Don't worry too much about that. Just don't memorize and don't say exactly with the same words, the same things, okay? When do you suggest taking the Casper test if school requires it? Oh, that's a very good question. That's slightly different from the interviewing, right? But I would recommend that you check your school deadlines. Once you have it, so there are schools that are going to have a deadline to submit this earlier than other schools. Once you have done it, you just can send it to all the other schools that are asking you for that. So don't worry too much about that. Go for the first one, take it, and then just resend to the other schools. Okay. I once had an interviewer state that, I think I'm missing a word here. My application probably said that my application was great and they have no questions, only asking if I had any. I wanted to tell the admissions committee. I was totally unprepared for it, so thank you for sharing this. This is important. They are expecting you to have done your homework, and when we do our homework, we always have questions. So make sure that you are prepared for this. Thank you so much for sharing. How does one answer such open-ended prompts without just restating your CV? So I would say if they ask if you have questions, ask about their programs, ask about these very unique programs they have, and first show that you know them, right? I know that you have this XYZ program, which consists of this, and that. But I wonder how you select students. I wonder what percentage of students who apply are selected, etc. Right? So first you show that you actually know them well and ask a very specific question about things that you may be curious about, and obviously it has to be something of your interest. Probably that program is of something important for you. So can be look like open questions, but actually you can go and narrow some questions according to the things you have learned about the school. Okay. If they are asking you to share if you want to share anything else that was not covered, think about it. If you have something you want to share with them, share it. And if you don't have anything, you don't need to make this up, right? It doesn't. The question about something else to add is different than, do you have questions for us? When they ask you, you have questions for us, you need to have questions for them. Okay. If they ask you about something else you need to add, if you have that thing, add it, and if not, you're fine. Okay. I have seen that some of the MD PhD programs I want to apply to have a day-long event on the day interviews where you can socialize, yes, with the current students in the program. Do you have any tips for how to present yourself, network, or ask questions? So that's a very good question. I can tell you that this is something that they need to organize for you. I've heard some comments from some admissions. They are trying to see how they can put Zoom meetings together with students, so you can have the interaction. I think they will do it in general. If you don't see that opportunity, then you need to reach out, right? Reach out to students, ask about the environment, ask about the fit, if that is a good fit for you. Yeah, so you're right. That is what we're going to miss this year, unfortunately, right? Among other many things. But I think they will try their best to do it. And if they don't do it, then you do it. Okay. All right. Let's see more questions here. Oh, okay. I think I reached the point where I answered the last question in the first half of my presentation. So let me now go down. And actually, I think I can make this bigger. Let me see how this works. Yes, like this. Okay, I think I reached the point for answering the question about why this school. I saw you suggested that we ask current students at that school for details. How do you recommend we reach out to ask students about their experiences in that school if we don't know anyone there? Oh, that's a very good question. So this is what we recommend. We recommend first your network, and that is your friends, but also your friends' friends, right? If you have a direct introduction, that's gonna work better. If you don't have that, I would recommend that you go to the alumni database from your institution. If you are at NIH, you have an alumni database at the OITE website. But if you are in other institutions, make sure that you look for this alumni database. Most of the schools have it. So you can actually be in contact with these people with something in common, right? You were from the same alma mater, and then you can ask your questions. Approaching people from a complete stranger approach, I don't think that's a more efficient way. If the school doesn't give you any, so you can approach the admissions people and say, I'd like to interact with people, and they may suggest other students there. Sometimes even on their websites, they have a list of students you can contact. But I would say look actively for this. Again, that could be your network, your friends' friends. Sometimes LinkedIn can work, right? So you see your friends, and then it just grows exponentially because you can see the other friends and you can see if you can actually be introduced to one of these students. Okay, great. A secondary question asks to explain weaknesses in your application. Okay, should we say why our hours are low if they were canceled because of COVID, or will they just assume your hours are low because of COVID? Oh, this is actually a very particular question, and it depends on how low and what experience. So let me put an example here. let's say that you actually started your clinical volunteering, your first clinical volunteering in your life in February, and you had 19 hours, and then after that they were canceled, right? So you are putting there, you are trying to estimate in the projected hours a lot of hours. They will understand why this was interrupted, but that really doesn't explain why you didn't have the exposure before. If you just remember that, especially for clinical volunteering and shadowing, admissions would like to see that you are making this decision after exploring the field. And those are the ways to explore the field, right? And also clinical jobs. So clinical jobs, shadowing, and clinical volunteering. The other things are important, but these three speak about the professional path, the information you have about medical school, right? Or actually the profession, not medical school, or both. So if you don't have this experience, this is actually a red flag, right? Very different situation that if you started your clinical volunteering when you were in that senior year or sophomore year, and actually you already had 200 hours. And then this activity that you started in February was interrupted, right? So you may be questioned for the first case, but probably not for the second one, because in the second you already had the exposure and you wanted to continue with this. But in the first one, you were just starting your exposure, right? So it depends on the case. Make sure that, and this probably already passed, but make sure that you had a solid number of hours, a good clinical exposure before submitting, because they will see that as the way you actually confirm your interest, right? Shadowing, clinical volunteering, or through clinical jobs. Let me see what time is it. Okay, so I'm happy to stay here for and answer the questions you have. I think we may cover some more if you want. I'm just gonna take some water. But for people who need to go, thank you for being here, and I hope this has been helpful for you. And I will continue answering some questions now. Okay, I think I have a question about the MD PhD. Let me see. Let me just go down. About how long should our answers to questions be? Especially, tell me about yourself. Oh, that's a very good question. How long? So I always, when I give this workshop, I always give the example of the boring movie and the very exciting and interesting movie, right? If the movie is boring, the first 20 minutes, you already know. If the movie is very interesting, if you want to learn more, doesn't matter if it's longer than the usual one, right? So we generally say 2 minutes, 1 minute and a half to 2 minutes and a half, but this varies a lot. And I really don't, I hate giving these minutes, number of minutes, because everyone is different. And a lot of you have a lot of things to share. So I've had, I mean, I can share with you a lot of really longer stories that you want to share with your admissions. There are people who have been through different challenges in their lives, right? So that may take more than 1 minute and a half, and that's okay. Don't be so worried about the time, as long as you identify that that information is important for this question. That's part of your story. That's going to help them know you better, right? I would say more than 3 minutes and a half or 4 minutes may be too long, right? So yes, of course there is a line, but it varies a lot. I would try not to be so worried about that. Okay. Good. Let's go to the next question. What do you do if you can't think of an answer? You stop. You can say, so we have different advice for this, right? If you use glasses, you take your glasses and say, give me a few seconds to think about that, right? Or you do whatever you do when you are thinking. I think it's important that you let them know that you are thinking, right? or that you have some ideas, but you are putting them together. That's different than when you don't have the answer. If you really don't have the answer, I mean, yes, you can still take a few seconds, but if you definitely know that you don't know the answer, please tell them that. I actually don't know that answer. And if you can even say something about the question, that's an interesting question, or something like that. Or I also be interested in knowing that, right? Something like that. Regarding the question about hours, I understand that clinical shadowing and volunteering are essential. That is correct. Are clinical jobs also essential? No. Clinical jobs are different because not everybody has that opportunity. You know a lot about the profession, so that shadowing may be compensated with the clinical job if you are involved and exposed to physicians. You are actually shadowing them when you are working, right? That is different from clinical volunteering, because when you volunteer in a clinical setting, you are also providing your service, and that's different from the job, right? Because you are paid. So clinical volunteering and shadowing usually are essential. Clinical jobs are not essential and can balance a little bit your shadowing. Okay. Okay, let me see if I actually covered the last one. Yeah. Okay. We go to the next one. Looks like this is the last one I have, at least here on my list. As an MD candidate, sorry, I just lost it. How should we speak about the research experience? Should we speak about it broadly or specifically? Oh, that's also a very good question. Research is always important, right? Even if you are not an MD PhD candidate, but the way and the approach you take is very important. So the same way that you described your research in that slot in your application. So you should start with the big picture, right? What is the big question in your lab? Is your lab intending to develop a vaccine for malaria? That big picture, right? And then you can go down. My project in particular consists of this and that. My contribution would help in this aspect of the vaccine. And it is exciting to see how we can contribute to develop this way of this prevention for this important disease. I don't know if you noticed that, but I started broad. I went to your project. I mentioned the results. Of course, I didn't mention the results, but you need to put your results here. And then I went broad again, right? This contribution, these results will help to find new ways to prevent. We really need to prevent malaria. This will help with that. Even if your project is this tiny piece of this big puzzle, right? Having the vision of seeing that big picture, details, and then the application is very important. So please don't tell them, I remember when I was running these Western blots and blah, blah, blah. These details are not that important here. More important, your big picture, recognizing the scientific questions you are answering, recognizing how medicine advances only through research, right? So your research is part of this advancement of medicine, recognizing your results and how this is going to contribute for medicine and how this is going to be applied to patients, okay? I always say the word patients is magic when you talk about your research. You always need to say, this will give an opportunity for patients with malaria to be diagnosed early, to prevent this disease, to whatever. But the word patients is important. Okay, I think I have another question here. On average, how much notice do you have from the time you are offered an interview to the day of the interview? Oh, this varies a lot, really. I have people who had this notice in advance a month, 2 months, 2 weeks, right? Every school is different, and especially this year, it may change, it may vary even more. So just be prepared. And for most of the schools, we're going to be at home. You need to prepare for the interview in a more general way. And then for the why this school, make sure that that is very specific, right? You need to tailor that one. And somehow tell me about yourself also need to show some match with the mission, which generally is a very similar mission for many schools. But you can start preparing like for every school at this moment for many of the questions, most of the questions they're going to ask you. Okay. How can we gain virtual shadowing experience? Oh, that's a hard question. It's been challenging these times. I've heard from some of our students that those who started interpreting before COVID pandemic, some of them were called to continue interpreting by phone or by teleconference. It's harder if you didn't start it before. I know that some hospitals are calling for people to interpret. I think that's the one I've seen more used because that can happen virtually, and probably soon they're gonna start opening, right? So you may have even that chance, but that I know that's challenging, and I'm sorry I cannot give you much more information about that. All right, I think that's the last question I see here. Am I correct, Gail?
Yes, that's correct. I
Okay.
just put a link in the Q&A for the list of some summer activities that the NAAHP has suggested.
Mm-hmm.
Some people might want to look at that as well.
Oh, that is great. I don't think I have the link here, but how can we share that? Can people?
I put it in the Q&A.
Oh, you already put it there. Okay, great. Thank you so much. Thank you. And I want to thank Dr. Gail Siebel, who is helping me today. She is the scientific coach at the Office of Intramural Training and Education. And I think we also had Dr. Kristen Zukowski before and Dr. John Taborn, both pre-med advisors, and they were also here. So we have our team working together here. All right, so I think we are done. Thank you very much for your attention. This is really fun. I would love to see your faces. I am a people person. I usually give this in a big auditorium and I see a lot of people there and I like acting. So I sit and I stand up and I walk in different ways. That was a little bit hard this time, but I hope this has been helpful for you and that you can practice and you can prepare well for those interviews. Thank you for being here today. Bye.